Jeff, this is absolutely great timing because 20 minutes ago, your recent blog post on Google's helpful content update and actually the product review update, that 3,000 word post just went live. And
I'm excited.
I got questions,
Right.
lots of them. And the first one I'm going to start off with is this. And what really caught my attention was that you mentioned that now with these recent updates, we can't look at Google's updates as an algorithm anymore. And you actually, I think, used the word an organism that is self-evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's been their goal, to be able to be open and honest about what these updates are about. And you've seen that over the last 18 months. So they've been willing to say, this is a product review update, right? They're confident that they've got so many different moving pieces behind the scenes that they can tell you, hey, guess what? Y'all are making money off of product reviews that aren't very good. You didn't actually review the products. Stop that, right? We're going to update this system. We're confident. And we're going to keep tightening our grip on bad product reviews, updates, and the content until product review quality is a bar that we're comfortable with. That has never been the case where they've given direct connection to a tactic, direct connection to, sometimes this was vague. Oh yeah, the penguin was certainly about links, but how was it? It wasn't directly related to a list of things to consider. Now, the helpful content update, they provided so much insight as things to think about when you're evaluating helpfulness and quality and all the things that might be associated. So they have got, if you imagine being at Google, you're looking at information retrieval team members, how queries get parsed, how they get supplemented, how they predict intent. Then you're looking at rating pages, then you're looking at rating sites, and you're looking at if the query doesn't have specific intent, if it's ambiguous intent, what if it has multiple meaning? What if it has local intent? All of those types of things go into serving a reasonable result. Now you're looking at multiple anti-spam, multiple initiatives all happening at the same time. Every query effectively has its own algorithm, right? Because of this multidimensional organism, there are general concepts one can follow, but for the most part, that's the case. And I think it tees them up for next year to start really policing ultra low quality content, to start becoming less reliant on links, to start doing other initiatives that they've long wanted to do.
And the other thing too that you mentioned is this whole thing about machine learning and how that factors in great deal with these recent updates. I think that really changes the ball game as well, don't you?
Yeah, the Google updates and the way that they manage anti-spam, the way that they manage the system using machine learning, that's been more than a decade. But advancements in this and the ability to do this at scale, the ability to do this on an ongoing basis, to move the bar up and down for even specific queries, even specific concepts, that's where being able to do that computationally and still provide a great user experience is where the changes are present. Computational power, being able to actually do that and still provide sub-microsecond response rates, those where the improvements really get seen. And I think that if you imagine Google being able to input data-driven hypotheses or subjective hypotheses about what makes something good and have that go into this, let's imagine hundreds of thousands of hypotheses all being processed in order to, at the end of the day, say good or bad, or on a composite, maybe on a scale of 1 to 100, this is 42, this is 52. That's where being able to do that with this huge organism, being able to do that for one concept and say, these are the aspects that we want to reward as a company. These are pages, these are the page aspects or page observations or performance metrics that we love. Let's put all of it into this big box, and then we reward as a helpful content update for sites who aren't meeting expectations, similar to core web providers. You're providing low quality user experiences because you're not serving these pages. You're impeding somebody from having a great user experience. You're slow. We want to make sure that if you're doing that, hey, we're going to start looking at speed. And now over time, they can ratchet that up, raise the bar, just like they can do with quality. Having high quality now, maybe they only knocked out the work 2%, the work 5%. But now maybe next time they can ratchet it up another percent. And they can start making that the precedent they set. Over time, quality has to go up. Over time, stuff that you're doing that isn't providing a great user experience, you gotta stop. And that is the framework of how they're gonna be successful.
And so you think they've set the bar low. And in that case, then there's a whole bunch of people out there or sites out there that maybe have gotten away this time. I wouldn't even say this time around, up to this point, because who knows, they could be continually upping that bar. But they still have to be worried, right?
Yeah, I mean, with the most recent spam update that was put out, I think a lot of people thought they were going to be killed by the harmful content update, and they didn't get hit. And they're like, "Oh, this thing doesn't know anything because I got this crappy site over here. It's got hundreds of thousands of garbage pages, and it didn't even get touched." But now you're saying, "Okay, well, you're the spam update. What is? It's pretty generic. That was a less when they said it is a spam. That was a less forthright list of things, right?"
Yeah.
But you're starting to see sites with what people thought was more higher quality spinning rephrasers. They're rephraser heavy. Gosh, you think you can't detect rephrasing, I got a bridge to sell you. But you saw a really high spinner impact, and then you're starting to see low quality generation start to get. And so if you've got a tell like that, a lean up your site that's low quality, there's publishers that have ugly custom sections of the site, and they're like, hopefully no one sees it, right? The clock is just ticking. It's not something that you're going to be able to get away with forever. It's always been this way. The challenge is, who are the companies at this, right? If you're an affiliate company, and if your site goes away tonight, which a lot of these sites can, you just don't create a new site, right? But if you're a brand or you're a publishing entity and you have these holes, or you've been very aggressive, they've got to get plugged, because you're putting that business at risk, not just that website. And that's the key, I think, right here is what businesses are at risk because of this versus what websites are at risk for this.
And in your article, you mentioned that with the helpful content update, Google's actually doing a page level analysis, but they're applying that site wide. So if I understand this correctly, then if I got a bunch of not so helpful pages, who knows how many would trigger it, but I could have a bunch of them. Let's just say, for argument's sake, just 20%. I'm just going to pick out a number here. I have 80%. That's great. And that 20% could actually affect how the rest of my site performs.
Yeah, it's the first time. There's always been evidence that this is an aspect of Google's calculations in the past. And this is the first time they've come out and said that this is a thing. They're not telling you for your query, for your type of site, for your types of pages, for these topics, what those percentages are, right? They're not going to give you that, or else, come on. But they are giving you the insight that some percentage of this is important. And so you've got a situation where maybe it's 20%, right? But the key is, if you have enough low quality content, your bad stuff can weigh down your good stuff. The challenge with the way that they've implemented it from a practitioner's perspective is you might not catch it because it's acting almost like a governor or a weight. So your page, your great page may go on your favorite query. It may go from 6 to 7. So that could be anything.
Yes.
So it could be 6 to 10. You're going to start to see trends. Maybe your top 50 pages all had a degradation, which is similar to the impact you would have seen in the past when you have a topic authority degradation. A bunch of pages will degrade, typically all due to one particular intent type or stage of the buyer journey that you weren't covering very well, but you were ranking for us. So it's the outcome of this feels a lot like other types of updates, right? So it's hard to reverse engineer, which is clever, very clever for Google. But what it basically is saying is, yeah, your collection of pages that are nonsense, garbage, low quality can hurt your best page, which it could be the most beautiful, lovely, thoughtful, expert driven content page ever written in the history of the world. I'm sorry, you're going to not be as prominent as you used to be. And in many cases, people are going to have a hard time with that because they work within siloed organization where marketing team doesn't talk to the product team doesn't talk to the editorial team, edit doesn't talk to post sales, support, implementation, help desk. So if that's your organization, big red flag. They got to get unified because one team may think that their content is great and it's actually hurting your entire company.
I was just thinking of that. And this sort of begs a question, though. Let's say that through miracle of miracles, you're in an organization like that, and yet you've actually identified that maybe it is a certain team that's running not the best content. And so you have this feeling, maybe this stuff just isn't good, and maybe it is weighing us down. What do? You just get rid of it? Just axe it?
Well, that's
Kinda
where
like
it's.
disowning bad links?
I've heard people make some really bad judgments off of hearing about this, or it's like they've resented something for so long and they finally get to make it the sacred cow to delete or make it the pariah of your site and have it be ripped out of the content. Unfortunately, in a lot of businesses, it's the way people talk about quote unquote SEO content. So it's like, that's our low quality stuff. We're just doing it for Google. It might be, but it could also be a different collection of content. It could be another type of content. The answer to it is absolutely not to just delete it off the face of the earth and not redirect it. I've seen people say that's what you should do. They're absolutely wrong. It so rarely is that as the answer. At minimum, if you're going to remove pages and not improve where they sit, not do redirection, repurposing, and improvements, not reconfigure where it sits within the site picture. If you're not going to do that stuff, at minimum, deletion and redirection to the best other page that you have, that's the meets minimum, right? Unless you have done something so horrible and it is ultra spam, you've tried to trick Google with tens of thousands of pages, and you got caught, and you're just like, okay, maybe cut that out and leave it to die. But in most cases, that's not going to be the situation because there's got to be some value for that page. And where I've seen this done wrong is where people will look at traffic and they'll delete content based on whether it had low traffic or not. It could be very supportive to the buyer journey. It could be very supportive to telling the story that you have expertise in the top. And there's always going to be a better solution if you have the time and resources to improve a page, maybe take 5 or 6 pages, combine them, make it higher quality and consolidated. So there's going to be solutions that are far better than deleting and not redirecting. So at minimum, deletion and redirection, and then start thinking about other ways that you can do a better job.
That makes sense. Something else that has been really, I've been thinking about this a lot, and we just haven't had a chance to talk about it. So maybe now we'll get some time. I'd say maybe a week, 2 maximum after the helpful content update came out, I started seeing references to essentially GPT-3 detectors that could detect content that was written using GPT-3, right? Because that's really the main language driver of so many AI content software that's out there using it to write long form content. And so I guess the premise here is that if I'm using an AI content generator to write my stuff, I'm worried now with this latest update. Maybe I can just use one of these detectors. And if it shows that it recognizes that my article is written using AI generator, maybe I can just obfuscate that somehow, throw some other text in or something like that, just to hide that from Google, and I'll be safe.
So there's so many pieces of that, because what's the worst thing that could happen if you work at Google? If a high quality detector was commercially available, which is almost like contradicting ones. It's paradoxical. It's paradox. Why? Because people would then try to do that. So when your language model, and think about Google's most recent language models, they are tens and hundreds of times more capable than GPT-3. To pathways, some of these massive infrastructure models, it's almost like a kid's GPT-3 compared to what could be done and what will be done. These will all release. They will start, and it's going to be hard to police. So Google's got to get their act together and build infrastructure to do detection regardless of the language model, looking at what's helpful and what's not, looking at quality signals, looking at comprehensiveness, looking at factual inaccuracies. Those are all going to be part of ensemble approaches that will hopefully, for their case, be language model independent. Because if they put all their eggs in one basket for GPT-3, what happens when GPT-4 comes out? Well, to square one, right? And so then from a practitioner's side, people are saying, as long as I edit this enough, so if I put this through enough revisions and I put this through a rephraser, that's another topic, but then I can get away with it. So if you think about the ensemble, it's very different than traditional detection. If you pair ensemble signals, let's say an ensemble detection method, which is, let's say it's looking for one of 80 characteristics of something that is likely low quality or generated. Or let's just say is likely generated. If you spun a little bit of that, right, may only trigger 5 or 6 of those signals. Okay, then are you also triggering 5 or 6 other signals over here, over here, over here? It's not a reasonable path for longevity. The risks are tremendous. So using generated content to inspire you so that the content item that you put out end up being amazing is always going to be great. Right? But if you're doing stuff to try to get away with doing less work, and then the outcome is poor quality, or it's things that aren't setting the bar for ultra high quality, you're gonna be in trouble. And you're starting to see that already happen with someone who started with a low quality draft, maybe not as good of a prompt to the generation, or even components of the page that are garbage, or they are getting inputs that you can do this at scale and then just pass it through 2 or 3 rephrasers in a row, which I've seen that advocated by affiliate people who are trying to help increase their affiliate revenues. Like, hey, just run it through a rephraser. It's because it's inspirational. Yeah, sure. A rephraser has one purpose and one purpose. It's hybridized. You have plagiarism, rephrase plagiarism, and then you also have rephrase generation.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 primary use cases for rephrasing. And if you can rephrase something against a content brief or a creative brief, or to check for tone, those are great use cases. But none of the publicly available rephrasers, with a few exceptions, have that goal, and they're not actually doing that. If you have a generated article passing through a rephraser that you don't touch and you publish, it's just as susceptible to the risk if you're doing it raw output. For sure. And no ifs, ands, or buts on that. I've seen them done. I've seen this work all done, and I've seen it happen.
Yeah, it seems to me that for Google to try to develop multiple detection models, because these language models will change over time. It's going to be like a whack-a-mole, right? And it doesn't seem it's not very productive. And what I notice is that on the update, they didn't call it an AI generated content update, because in fact, the point is not how the content gets created. The point is whether it's good or not. So if they just focus on the end result, meaning is the content helpful or not, that's the key, right? It doesn't matter how it's created. Now, the problem, of course, is that, and I know this because I've done analysis when GPT-3 came out, you find that all of this generated content is very topically, it's shallow. And that's really easy to identify. Syntactically, it's wonderful. All the syntax is down. They've got that done very well. But when it comes to the semantics and how things relate to each other, how the different topics relate to each other, what's covered, that's where it breaks down. And that's really easy for Google to spot.
Yep. Yeah. And also, is it odd that you did this based on what it already knows about you too? Like, those are components that Google has to get to, right? It has to get to the position where it's saying, is it odd that you're the one writing this, the level of quality? My perspective is it's going to begin to even more reward unique expertise. So like getting to the point where it's saying everyone who covers early stage awareness on this topic. What's the bar for that? What's the meets minimum for covering this topic? What is that? Now, does your page represent an exhibit that you've got that little something extra and in a genuine and authentic way? Because there's a meets minimum. Those are the phenomena you're going to start seeing, and as the bar gets raised. And then you're also going to be, Google's going to be challenged to, and this is going to hurt smaller companies, is to say, hey, in this space, it's going to be real hard, even harder to break in. It's going to be even harder to start a new site from scratch as these get better and better, no matter how good the content is that you come out with. And that's really when the fundamentals and ethics of Google start getting challenged. It's to say, how accessible is this technology? What does it mean for the bars that we raised? And sadly, I think what you're going to see is that breaking into a topic will get harder and harder over time. And having content written by non-experts is going to actually be a business risk. And that's tough. That's tough for anyone.
That is, and you've just opened up a whole can of worms there.
And you get that, and then you have publishing networks. How is Google treating two sites that merge together? Is Google treating two sites that are owned by the same company? How is quality and authority evaluated? Those are the internal business challenges at Google right now. Certainly, make sure we don't get crushed by spam, as always, right?
Yes.
For $49.99 a month, I can have access to a generator that is effectively state of the art, could give somebody with almost no technical expertise the ability to publish an infinitely large content site. That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So now that is reality. That's today. And you saw people do that. You saw SEOs, they call them one-trick pony sites or one-tactic sites. You saw SEOs buy portfolios of domains and publish massive quantities of generated content on various topics to see how it would react. You see, they call them, tactical SEOs, where they'll do one tactic site. So one tactic site over here, one tactic site over there, because that's their perception of scientific method.
Right.
That's a rich way. But another topic for another day. But those are the types of things that now people can do. But that gets a newsflash. Good SEOs have always been able to do that. And they always have, right? Macro SEO has existed for more than a decade. There's a pizza place. There's a major pizza chain that has generated garbage text on every one of their locations, and they have for 7 years. And this stuff has existed for a long time. It's just the bar is being raised, and it's also hard for Google because it's become barrier to entry is low. It's not just a few super advanced SEOs who know how to spin or who know how to generate, or a few language companies like G or Narrative Science or Automated Insights or Aria who offer products for the elite. Like they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Yeah. It's not just for them, it's for everyone. And that makes Google have to quake. Yes. Unless you got people like you and me at Google thinking about it, which they do at people like you and me, and people much smarter than us too. Yeah. Who recognize this. Do they all agree internally at the various teams? Not. Well, they don't agree. And so that's why they have to create these more democratic machine learning methodologies. I remember reading in 2011, as shocking as that sounds, it was that long ago, some of the Google scientists, and it was like, yeah, you come in one day and put a hypothesis in about what makes a spammy page, but you don't just get to make that rule put in place. You have to prove it out with data. So I think I remember the example was like, I could come in and say, all websites with red backgrounds are bad. Okay, cool. You can say that, throw that into the machine. And if it validates, then we'll talk about it and determine if that's the best business decision for anti-spam, right? That was the old days of machine learning. Now you've got this, like I mentioned at the top of this multi-layer organism. I mentioned it's 5D chess they're playing. That's why straighten up, fly right, and do high quality. It's never been more true than now. And because you can play 5D chess against Google. It's just ridiculous to even think that you can. And you can get away with it. You can have passive income sites. As long as they're high quality, you can really slam and jam. And I see it. I mean, there's very famous, popular SEOs who have great personal networks. And they're like, I still make hundreds of billions of dollars and you don't do it like me. Oh, okay, you do. There's usually exceptions on those sites, which we all talk about. But the reality is, if you're working for a brand, set the bar as high as possible today so that you're not the victim when Google sets their bar. That's my advice. That's my advice for everybody.
So basically, like when you see John Mueller on Twitter, and he always says that just create awesome content. It seems like he's a broken record, but that really is it, isn't it? When it comes down to.
Think about this, right? What's the counterpoint? Right?
Yeah.
And that's my point. It's like, what's the counterpoint? It's that you're going to create less than awesome content and or good enough content. Why? Because it's cheaper. It's easier to get out. You don't have that expert resource. All signs point to the fact that you're acknowledging what you put out is bad. If you think it's great and you launch it, that becomes an ethical problem, right? Because you actually did your best. And that's where I struggle when sites like put their best foot forward. They truly did and can be victim of this stuff. For the most part, if you know you're producing low quality content, you're making that decision. You've made some sort of justification. But over time, it's just bad news. And that's where my soapbox that I love to stand on is, if you've got a business that you want it to be there in 5 years, where you can't just pack up and launch a brand new site, low quality content can't be part of your methodology. Now, what is low quality? Then is always the next question. Like, if you can't say that if somebody got to that page through this collection of queries, that they would be good, they'd be happy with it. If you can't say that with a straight face, you got to put eyeballs on it. And that could mean that you have a page template. It's kind of like product-led SEO. You've got 90,000 permutations of something and you land on it and it's 400 words. It's coming from a database. But if someone's happy with it, it's a directory. This is professional, something like that. Hey, those are the cases. Hey, can I make that template better? Even at that level, you got to start thinking, is this providing a lot of value? And if you're too heavily reliant on that stuff, this is the time to make that a priority. Because if you can justify it, this is a valuable page for someone to land on who has this intent. That's enough. That's enough right now. Will it always be?
That's the question too. And then that's the exact thought that popped in my head, is that what's valuable today, next year may not be valuable. So it's not like you can just publish something and call it a day and just move on.
Let's use historical reference on this, right? There's so many techniques that were end arounds on Google that don't work, that can be examined. One of them that I quite frequently is attached is OOS, or out of stock management. So if you have low quality or thin content on a product page that's out of, and you provide no additional value, why do you think that page would rank as well as it did when you had stock? There was, for a long time, out of stock was, the page would do just swell, because you think about it, it's the same page. So that's one example. Search results, internal search results pages, category pages with there's no taxonomy infrastructure, category pages where you have no buyer journey content. So there's many examples of this that are case specific. I like to use the pink dress example in e-commerce and say, if I search for pink dress in Google and your top ranking page is SKU 1841, like your weirdly cut pink dress, how often is it that somebody typed in pink dress was actually looking for that pink dress, right? Yeah. Not very often. So that means you've got e-commerce structural issues, right? What is your best page for if somebody typed in pink dress, right? Why isn't that the page you have? That's the question you always have to ask yourself. What would be our best foot forward for this particular query and this particular intent? And why isn't that our? That's how every SEO, that's how every content marketer, every CMO needs to be thinking. If you care about that query, why aren't you providing the best page? Or at least the best page that you can, whether you're e-com, whether you're selling SOX, or are you selling $500,000 cybersecurity software? That's the crux of it, is that sequence of questions.
All right, Jeff, we have run out of time. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Steven. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye now.